So right now in Switzerland, in a place that is owned by the Qatari royal family, meetings have simply concluded for the time being. 3 different times during these meetings, the Iranian delegation walked out. The reason they walked out is because of unhinged rants from somebody in the White House who should be keeping his mouth shut.
You're either going to cut back on air travel or you're going to cut back on diesel fuel. Can't do both. Hi there. Welcome to the latest episode of Transition Protocol. I'm Larry Johnson, and the host today, as always, Mr. Z, Zulfiqar Ali, a well-established businessman and also a knowledgeable person about events around the world. And not with us today, but he'll be there tomorrow, Pepe Escobar, my colleague and dear friend. And then Pepe and I will be with you on Wednesday to have a discussion. We try to integrate the latest intelligence with analysis and try to update you on what's really going on, because we do have some interesting access to current events. And so with that, Mr. Z, take it away. Give us the latest news update.
Well, I am thrilled to be with my very dear friend and colleague, Larry Johnson. And tomorrow I look forward to having my dear friend and colleague, Pepe, and then our joint session on Wednesday. It has been very well received all over the world, and I'm very thankful for it. And I'm grateful that we get the chance to do this commentary. We have privileged information. By privileged information, I mean information that certain parties have decided that they will have this information in our possession so that we can make good use of it. And we have been making good use of it because we have not added anything to this information. We have not taken away anything from this information. We present it just the way it is. We ask the world to verify it if they can. And with the experience that Larry Johnson has with the CIA and with Pepe Escobar has all over the world, they analyze this information. The world is in transition. No question about it. No question, the world will not be the same 5 years from today. And those who listen to us will understand this change as it is happening. So right now in Switzerland, in a place that is owned by the Qatari royal family, meetings have simply concluded for the time being. 3 different times during these meetings, the Iranian delegation walked out. The reason they walked out is because of unhinged rants from somebody in the White House who should be keeping his mouth shut. But he does not know how to do that. Also, determined to make sure that the negotiations do not go anywhere is Netanyahu, who keeps on bombarding Lebanon. And the Pakistanis understood all this. Field Marshal Munir was there in person. Pakistani Prime Minister was there in person. They lived in the same compound with the Iranians, separate from the Americans. The Qataris were there to hold their hands and Iranians' hands. And every time Iran walked out, literally walked out 3 different times, Qataris, Pakistanis went there to assure them that they need to go through this one process. That is the process of identifying a roadmap towards peace. Now, Pakistanis have persuaded the Iranians not to attack Israel for the time being. We told you in this show that if Israel kept up the bombardment, Iran is determined to attack Israel in a very significant way. Pakistanis have persuaded Iran to give them some chance, maybe 2 or 3 days, for Americans to rein in the Israelis. If that happens, then there is greater movement towards progress. The Strait of Hormuz will remain open, and there shall be progress on all other matters. We have a lot of information that we provided to Mr. Johnson, and I'm anxious to see his analysis.
Well, thank you, Zulfiqar. Listen, folks, we're trying to grow this channel. We're doing it, and it's growing at a fairly rapid pace. If you just hit the like and subscribe buttons, you will help it along, help us establish a presence so we can keep getting this information out. You know, one of the most surprising developments of this last month has been the emergence of Pakistan as the leader of these negotiations. Now, I know some critics of the current government, and it goes back to the conflict between the former Prime Minister, Mr. Khan, and the head of the army, Mr. Munir, that or General Munir, that they assume that Pakistan is just a tool of Washington, D.C. But I think what has been established over the course of the interactions, where Pakistan has had a long relationship with the United States and with my former outfit, the Central Intelligence Agency, that stretches back 70 years, for as long as I've been alive. And in the 70s, it was in the early days of the U-2 program, Pakistan played an important role in supporting those flights then over the Soviet Union. In later years, Pakistan played a staging base for CIA operations against the Soviet occupation of Afghanistan. So there has always been this relationship. But what has emerged right now, I believe, in the last 4 weeks is Pakistan asserting its own independence. That is not some, if you will, lackey or servant of Washington. In fact, it has actually played the opposite role, because while it has enjoyed, a relationship with Washington, with the United States over the years, it's also had a relationship with Iran. And I learned today, and Brother Z can elaborate on this, but the Iranian language is not that different from the language spoken in Pakistan in terms of Urdu, and that it's, let's call it like the similarities between Spanish and Portuguese, that different languages, but they have a common root. So, and with the presence also of Iranians living in Pakistan, and the shared interest of Pakistan and Iran in dealing with Baluchi insurgents or Baluchi independents who are trying to break away from either country. So they have cooperated on security matters. So it is with this as background that Pakistan has played a remarkable role. Initially, as we reported several weeks ago, that when President Pezeshkian, after the consultations with the Security Council in Iran, delivered to Pakistan basically an ultimatum to pass on to Washington regarding that if Washington balked and refused to engage on these talks, Iran was prepared to demonstrate its ability to produce and detonate a nuclear weapon. Now, that created a lot of flack, and people attacked both Pepe and I for passing on that information. But that information came from reliable Pakistani sources. And it was after that information was conveyed to the United States that you saw an immediate change in Donald Trump's demeanor and words about Iran that were less combative, more conciliatory, and finally created an opening for actual negotiations. More recently, while there was a seeming impasse between Pakistan and between Iran and the United States regarding the Memorandum of Understanding, we then saw a sudden shift, call it reversal, on the part of Donald Trump, that instead of dragging his feet and hesitating, he admitted a willingness to sign that Memorandum of Understanding, which took place last week while Trump was attending the G7. Now you have to ask the question, why? And this is where we get into the issue of where we're looking at something as fundamental as the creation of a new security architecture in the Persian Gulf. With the cutoff of 20% of the global supply of oil coming out of the Persian Gulf, Donald Trump was informed about 2 weeks ago, it coincided with his sudden reversal, that within weeks, the supply of oil would reach a critical status and it would begin to cause enormous harm to the international economy. Countries around the world would be affected, in particular, especially the United States. And it's not just oil in general, but it has specifically to do with what are called middle distillates. So if you think of a barrel of oil as having sections, about 30% of that oil is used as what they call mid-level mid distillates. That's used to make, and you have to make a choice here. You can't make them both at the same time from the same barrel. You either turn it into jet fuel for airplanes, or you turn it into diesel, fuel for trucks, trains, some automobiles, but it's a commercial use for hauling products. You can't do both. And the problem is, since the cutoff of the oil that took place in February of this year, and February 28th to be precise, 20% of the world's oil is gone. And most countries around the world have tried to cope, including the United States, by using up elements of the Strategic Petroleum Reserve. Now, that Strategic Petroleum Reserve doesn't essentially consist of just one class of oil. You've got the light crude and the heavy crude, and it's from the heavy crude that you make the diesel fuel and the jet fuel. But understand, you have to make a choice. What are you going to do? Up until the ceasefire that was announced, it was announced really 15th of April, but we didn't get actually an effective end to bombings, strafings, and combat operations was until a week ago, on roughly June 11th, or a little bit more than a week ago. So we're talking 11 days ago. That's when you finally started getting the air operations, U.S. launching combat attacks on Iranian targets in the Strait of Hormuz. So that has reduced the demand, if you will, for aviation fuel. But when you look at the shortage that's now has developed for the United States, the total amount of oil that can be held in these salt caverns that are at 4 locations in the southern United States, those salt caverns can hold a combined 750 million barrels of oil. When the United States has been drawing that down, it's now down to a level of 340 million barrels per oil at least. But understand, that's not just light crude. It's a mixture of light crude and heavy crude. And then when you realize that there's a minimum level of oil that you need to keep in those caverns, and that number is estimated to be around 140 million barrels of oil total. Now, again, the amount per individual cavern varies, but total 140 million. So just do the math. That leaves 200 million barrels of oil. But of that 200 million, I think the number is close to like 80 million barrels of oil are for this naphtha, for the mid distillate. The other 120 can be for regular gasoline. So there you're looking at a shortage now on the mid distillate level that the usage is such that even with the Strait of Hormuz open and supposedly oil flowing right away, there is going to be a gap of between 30, and that's just assuming if it opens today and it begins flowing, 30 to 60 days of shortage, which is going to have a devastating effect. It's going to require one thing. You're either going to cut back on air travel or you're going to cut back on diesel fuel. Can't do both. And so it is that dilemma that shocked Trump into moving forward with these negotiations to settle it. Now, what we also understand is that the reopening of the Strait of Hormuz, people think, okay, good, it's open. The oil is flowing. There are three major obstacles that are preventing the full return to capacity. Remember, the full capacity prior to February 28th was about 120 ships per day moving. Going forward, Iran has agreed to a 60-day moratorium where they're not going to charge a user fee. Donald Trump calls it a toll. The Iranians call it a user fee, an administrative expense, and there's something that will be shared with Oman. Roughly an estimated 12% of the world's total cargo ships are based right now, or have been at anchor for 4 months in the Persian Gulf. What that means is it's not those ships, you just can't call the captain up and say, okay, captain, start your engines, let's go. No, those ships are going to need servicing before they can return to their actual job of moving products like oil, liquid natural gas, helium, sulfur, you name the product. So there's let's call it the maintenance and repair issue that needs to be addressed. Second, we do not know the actual condition of the terminals for oil, liquid natural gas, how much the damage has been. It is believed that several of the terminals are damaged, that it will take months to repair. So even if you have an empty ship sitting offshore, ready to be loaded, there may not be any oil that can be put on board because the infrastructure is damaged. So that's a second issue that's going to delay return to full operations. Third, the insurance issue. Apart from the Iranian flagships, which are already loading up oil, moving it out, selling it to China, and note, these transactions are in yuan, they're in the Chinese currency that's not in the petrodollar. That's a whole nother issue to be discussed. But the other ships have to be insured by Lloyd's of London, for example. And one of the concerns for Lloyd's of London is there reportedly are many minefields in the Persian Gulf that Iran laid as part of the early effort to shut down traffic. Removing those mines, according to the Pentagon, the U.S. Pentagon, now known as the Department of War, they told Congress on April 15th, you're looking at up to 6 months. The point of all this is that Iran still retains significant leverage in the negotiating process and have stayed in close contact and coordination with Pakistan throughout this. Now, there's another whole dimension being played out here before our eyes. The countries Qatar, Saudi Arabia, I'm going to exclude Kuwait for now, Bahrain, but include Oman and the United Arab Emirates. They've been talking to, and Pakistan has been playing a leading role in this as well, of promoting the new security architecture. So
don't forget Turkey.
Well, yeah, well, I'm getting to that. I'm talking specifically about the Gulf, because yesterday, while the meetings were going on in Switzerland, Pakistan convened a meeting of Egypt, foreign minister, Turkey's foreign minister, Saudi Arabia's foreign minister, and Pakistan. So the vision is that in the past, the Gulf Arabs, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Bahrain, Oman, and United Arab Emirates, they were asked to depend upon the United States for their security. Now, this was always done with a jaundiced eye towards Iran, that they were going to, protect these countries from Iran. And what they discovered now in the latest, the start of this Ramadan war, is that the U.S. presence in those countries actually put them more at risk, and they incurred significant damage. They've suffered significant economic loss because they, in fact, trusted the United States to protect it, instead of realizing that the United States was simply using those countries for the United States purposes that had more to do with protecting Israel, not with protecting those states. So now there's a strong movement among them to establish their own, let's call it an Arab Muslim security architecture. So the Arab countries, coupled with the Muslim nations, where Iran, like the other countries, albeit Shia, but nonetheless they come together as Muslims, all believing in Allah. This is the first important step towards pushing the United States from the region and establishing an independent authority. So all of this is background to these negotiations that took place outside of Lucerne, I believe it was, at Birkenstock, and the apparently, as Zulfiqar noted, the insults from Donald Trump came close to derailing the negotiations. But Pakistan's vision here, it's not just Pakistan, because Pakistan is cooperating with China and with Russia in this venture, because the broad vision where this is going is creating a new international financial order that will not be under the control of the United States, where the United States can no longer use threats of coercion or seizure of assets in order to compel nations to do something that's not in the interest of those nations. And we have actually seen in the course of the last month that there has been an acceleration in the number of banks around the world that are establishing, let's call it, correspondent banking relationships with the Chinese banks so that money can be moved between banks. But the Chinese system, unlike SWIFT, which is dominated by the US dollar, based in Europe, the new Chinese program, CIPS, Cross-Border Interbank Payment System, has been growing and is growing rapidly. It is a digital system, unlike SWIFT, which is an analog system. SWIFT is basically email. You get an email, it gets sent, whereas the digital system that China is using provides instant auditing as well as tracking of assets. This is becoming increasingly important as Iran going forward will start selling its oil not in US dollars, but in Chinese yuan. So with that as the whole backdrop, we realize that the United States, despite the threats of Donald Trump, outrageous statements threatening to murder the delegation, we see that the United States did apply significant pressure to Israel. Israel, if left to its own devices, would still be attacking Lebanon, but the orders have come down to not further the attacks. And what we're looking at here is we have to ask, what kind of pressure was the United States able to apply? And I believe it consists of the following. We know that during the actual combat operations between Iran and Israel and the United States that started 28th of February, continued until roughly April 7th, April 15th, that the 2/3 of the air defense operations were carried out by the United States. Now, there were problems with Patriot interceptors and THAAD interceptors. They weren't all that effective, but still, it was better than nothing. And that's what Israel relied upon, despite claiming to have David Sling and Iron Dome. Withdrawal of those assets would represent a significant threat for Israel. I don't know this for sure, but I'm suspecting that's one of the items of pressure that Donald Trump had in convincing, telling Bibi Netanyahu, stand down, stop the attacks in Lebanon. The other is the withdrawal of U.S. air assets from the region, because once those planes that are currently on the ground in Israel and in Jordan and in Saudi Arabia, once those are moved out of that area, it's going to take a couple of weeks to actually get all those aircraft ferried back to their home stations in the United States, which means if they were needed again for some sort of new military action, it'd be weeks away. It would not be just an hour or so away. So in addition, there is military equipment and military assistance that Israel is expecting that Donald Trump is in the position to withhold. I don't know what specific threats and or leverage he used, but what is clear is that it was used because Israel, as of this afternoon, we're now roughly 2:30 on Monday, June 22nd. Israel has not been launching the massive attacks inside Lebanon that it was 2 days ago. So the early news out of the negotiations is, at least from J.D. Vance's standpoint, is being presented as progress, that Iran has in principle agreed to allow IAEA inspectors to come back in. That is the U.S. account. We still have not heard Iran's explanation of what they have actually agreed to, but they are in close contact with Pakistan and with Oman, and with both Oman and Qatar. That's the interesting aspect, that despite the Western perception that Iran represents a threat to the Gulf states, the reality is it was Iran that came to the assistance to rescue Qatar 7 years ago, when Qatar was facing threats of war from Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates. Similarly, Oman played a leading role in the initial negotiations before basically the betrayal that took place on February 28th. So Iran has done a very careful job of cultivating solid diplomatic relations with Oman, with Qatar, and with Saudi Arabia. The reestablishment of those relationships made possible by the intervention and assistance behind the scenes, primarily of the Chinese, but also with Russian participation. So we now sit at a moment of still great danger. The need to continue the negotiations has been impressed on all parties. Iran, despite having ample reason to walk away from the negotiations, has decided to stay and to participate because they know that they have the backing not only of the Saudis or the Pakistanis, but the Saudis, as well as looks like the backing of Turkey and Egypt. But behind all of this is China and Russia, and the creation of a new international economic financial order that will no longer put countries in the place of being blackmailed simply because they want to use dollars to buy oil. That's the summary there, Z.
Well, fantastic summary. I could not have done better. However, I would like to now emphasize what happens 3 years from today. I mean, it's not going to happen overnight, when the dollar is no longer supreme. 3 years is not that far away.
Correct. Well, we just look how fast. So, the real impetus for this movement started when Russia initiated the special military operation in Ukraine. And the West responded immediately by seizing Russian assets, $300 billion worth, and then also threatening, imposing sanctions. And then in the course of the 2022, there was also a very bellicose language coming out of Washington, D.C., directed at China. So it was in January, I believe it was January, maybe or February of 2023. Xi Jinping traveled to Moscow, had a warm, despite the wintry weather, warm meetings with Vladimir Putin. And it was at that meeting that both agreed that they needed to accelerate the process of moving BRICS forward into this new financial economic order. And ever since then, they've been working diligently to construct a new financial infrastructure that will handle this. Once in place, and BRICS has an advantage here because right now, when you put all the countries of BRICS together, their total GDP, as measured in purchasing power parity, is greater than that of the G7. So it's a sign of how dramatically the world economy has changed in the last 15 years. 15 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case. Now it is. China, India, Russia, they are in the top four. Only the United States is the only non-BRICS nation in that top four for GDP measured by purchasing power parity. And by creating this alternative financial system, the threat of sanctions is going to be vanquished forever from the international political order. It will no longer have the kind of detrimental effect that it has had over the course of let's assign it the last 80 years since the end of World War II.
Well, you take away the threat of sanctions, which has been the primary arsenal of hegemony.
Right.
What else do you have?
Yeah. Well, then you have to adopt what I call the Chinese-Russian model, which is come out and persuade people, talk to them, listen to them, have a collaboration, not coercion. Collaboration instead of coercion. That's been the key. And look, I don't want to underestimate that there are still some very delicate minefields to navigate here. The relations between India and China, that once was quite tense, and they were on the verge, have frequently over the years been at war, not really at war, but skirmishing and rough relations. But moves have been taken to heal that rift. Similarly, touchy relations between Pakistan and India. So, and it is not beyond the West through their intelligence organizations to try to exploit those, to try to create incidents, false flag incidents that will further try to increase tensions, to drive a wedge between Pakistan and India, drive a wedge between India and China, drive a wedge. I'll say that Prime Minister Modi of India didn't do himself any favors on the 26th of February when he went to Israel and basically prostrated himself before Bibi Netanyahu and was seen very much as a supplicant or a lackey. I think he has come to regret that. I think he is, they've seen further, actions or insults take place against him. Once the war started, for example, India invited Iran to participate in a naval exercise. Iran came to that naval exercise and then was ambushed just outside Indian territorial waters by the United States, killing naval personnel of the Iranian Navy who were unarmed. Just another typical war crime. So there are. I don't want to suggest that it's all smooth sailing ahead, but the activities are in motion. Now we saw. I've commented on some other programs recently that at the meeting in Birkenstock, there was a moment where the Qatari foreign minister showed up, and JD Vance is standing to the immediate right of Prime Minister Sharif, and the foreign minister walks up, warmly embraces Sharif, ignores Vance. Vance looked like he was reaching for him, ignores him, and then he turns to General Munir and warmly embraces him, and then turns back without looking in J.D. Vance's direction. Now, he is now out on, I'll call it the apology tour, saying, "Oh, no, that wasn't an intended slight. I didn't see him, or I was preoccupied, or my dog ate the homework." So going back, but the message that Qatar is sending to the United States, Qatar is host to the largest military base in the region. Qatar is no longer going to be the U.S. lackey. And that was evident in part by the role it came to play in these talks to settle the war between the United States and Qatar and get the United States out of the Persian Gulf and allow the Arab and Muslim countries to be responsible for the Gulf security. Now, one final comment about United Arab Emirates. They have been a notorious lackey of Israel. They have been deeply enmeshed with Israel. And it's only been over the last 3 weeks that as the Emirates' status as the leading money laundering country in that region, it is opened up to reestablishing or trying to establish better relations with Iran. Emirati officials traveled to Tehran on June 9th and held unexpected talks with the Iranians. There's even some reports that they provided, what was provided to them was money that was held in Emirati banks. So that is, we're seeing a warming of relations there. But anyway, I think this is our update for today. Do you have anything to add?
Well, I don't have anything to add today, Larry, because we will be here for another 2 hours if I did that. Yeah. And we have a show tomorrow with Pepe, and we have a show tomorrow between all three of us. And this is a promise that I make to our global audiences. We will be in many different languages, thanks to our friend Pascal. And I request people who listen to us to hit the subscribe button, to watch for us, to watch when our shows are going to be. They are going to be on a cadence, and we will continue to give you the news beneath the news and beyond the news.
Yeah, what Brother Z is referring to here is we're going to make sure that these shows are translated into a variety of languages: Chinese, Russian, Spanish, Portuguese, German, Italian, so that people who have trouble, who want to listen, but for language reasons don't have access, we're going to get that access. This will become a global program with enormous reach. And you can help us get there, again, by hitting the like and subscribe button. So, once again, Mr. Z, thanks for all you do in helping with your vision and bringing this together. I'm Larry Johnson, and this is the latest episode of Transition Protocol. Thanks for watching.
Thank you very much, Larry, my dear friend, my dear brother, who made this happen. I'm going to hit the stop and just allow for a couple of minutes because it will be uploaded.